So yes, I want to talk about resolving conflict, and gosh, it's such a big area that I can't go into it as much as I'd like to. It's one of those issues that comes up again and again in all human life. Is this great matter of conflict, of difficulty, of aggression, aversion, of violence, even. So what I thought I'd do is just look at three discrete areas just to give you a sense of what I want to talk about. Really, this is only a starter kit. I mean, you can have a whole course on resolving conflict. So what I want to talk about is resolving conflict within yourself, first of all. How would we resolve conflict within yourself? And then I want to say something about resolving conflict with others, with people you know, with friends, with people people you don't like. But the main thing I want to talk about is on this larger scale of how we resolve conflict in society. Actually, I'm not the best person to talk about that because, as I've often said to my friends, I don't have a political bone in my body, or if I do, it's like a little toe, perhaps. But like you, and like so many people, of course, I'm struck by what you hear on the news, what we're hearing through Black Lives Matter and so on. This whole matter of racism and extending that to prejudice. On Saturday, I'm going to be interviewing an American poet, and his great grandfather's family were murdered in a pogrom. He comes from a Jewish background. So when you have stories like Black Lives Matter, when you hear some of the stories, and then when you extend those stories, well, you don't need to extend them, but when you also remember things like too many horrors to even mention. I'm always nervous of mentioning horrors because you can do that for very suspicious reasons. But I want to, if I can, say something about that. And that's the main thing I want to talk about if I can. I don't know whether I'll manage it. Tomorrow night, Subhuti and Suragupta are going to spend a whole evening. In fact, I'll be introducing it in an evening, exploring that. So do come back tomorrow night. But the first thing I want to focus on is we have conflict within ourselves, don't we? Yeah. So that's the first thing to say. If you're going to be able to resolve conflict with others, you need to be able to resolve conflict within yourself, with yourself. Yeah. We all of us have conflicting urges and drives. We want one thing but do another. We say one thing and do another. We're often at variance with ourselves, at conflict with ourselves. We tell ourselves to do stuff like meditate, like go to the gym, like be kinder to my partner, and then we don't manage it. And then we tell ourselves off for not managing it. We say we must do better, and then we just go around that loop again. So many people I've met are in that kind of loop. They know what they should do. You don't need a Buddhist to be telling you what you should do. It's pretty easy. You already know. And then you don't do it. And then you tell yourself off for not doing it. And then you tell yourself you should do it again. And so you go around. How do we get out of that circle? I won't say a lot. There's a lot to say about that, but I won't say very much because I want to make sure there's enough time for meditation and for other matters. But I think the main thing I wanted to stress is, first of all, that we are in conflict with ourselves, at very least at variance with ourselves. We're very rarely one person wholly attending. We're very rarely complete. We're a kind of a group of people, even a crowd, often in conflict with ourselves. Yeah. So the main thing I just want to say about that is the commitment to cultivating awareness. Yeah. So that's really, you could say, really, really simply what Buddhism is about. You've got this figure behind me. You've got this incredible 2,500 year history of Buddhism. But you could boil it down to a one word, which is awareness, if you wanted to. And that what we call Buddhism in the West is about cultivating awareness. And that needs to start with a commitment to self-awareness. Yeah? And that commitment to self-awareness is exemplified in meditation. Yeah? What I'd like to see in the world, never mind the horrors around me, and there's so many, one of the things that my tiny contribution to that, and it is tiny, like all of our contributions, most of our contributions are tiny, is to encourage people to meditate. In other words, to encourage people to commit to awareness. Meditation is working on your mind, directly with your mind. You're trying to become aware of yourself, including those conflicting parts of yourself. In the old-fashioned terminology, you try to get to know yourself better. People don't use that anymore, but you're becoming aware of yourself. Yeah. So the first, if we want to resolve conflict in the world, or if we want to resolve conflicts with our friends and family and loved ones and our work colleagues, first thing we need to do is resolve conflict within ourselves. We need to be, and the prime way of doing that is cultivating awareness. Awareness is based on self-honesty, being really, really able to be honest with ourselves. This is what I'm like. This is the state of mind I'm in. Can I be aware of that state of mind? Yeah. So you're not going to be able to help the world until you're aware of yourself. You're not going to be able to help that argument you're having with your manager until you're aware of yourself. Now, awareness of yourself will go on, but you need to keep coming back to. I need to keep coming back to. We all need to keep coming back to awareness of ourselves. Otherwise, you're acting out of unawareness, and you're very, very likely to make things worse. Out of often good intentions, but you're very likely to make things worse because it's coming out of unawareness, of non-reflection, and you'll be mixed up in it, if you see what I mean. You know, it's like where I've been feeling this recently in my own life, that there's something mixed in my motivations at times, which is not very healthy. And it's very, very difficult to be aware of it, and very, very difficult not to start to run my motivations. Yeah. So that's the first thing I want to say, is resolving conflict within yourself is a matter of cultivating awareness. That's what Buddhism is about. That's what meditation's about. So secondly, and briefly, resolving conflict with others. We all come into conflict with others. It's an inevitable matter. In a way, I was going to say you should avoid conflict as much as possible, but often your attempt and my attempt to avoid conflict weirdly causes it. One of the reasons why conflicts happen is because people have been avoiding it. But of course, if you don't avoid it and you get into conflict, very often you make things worse for yourself and for other people. You know what it's like. You try and say something, it comes out wrong. People take offense. They then get difficult with you. You take offense. Before you know it, you're off. We're often involved, I think, in righteous wars where each party is completely believing in their own righteousness, their own rightness, and then falling out with the other. I'm hearing quite a lot of that in the streets, even when I walk around the park. I'm hearing, I was just walking past somebody on the phone the other day. It's sort of really painful, sort of shouting at somebody on the phone, and you know, it's clearly a righteous war. Yeah. So there's everything to say about that. You see how if you try to avoid conflict too much, you get into conflict. But if you just crash into conflict without awareness, if you haven't developed awareness, you're very likely to just create more conflict. And the world doesn't need any more conflict. It really doesn't. Your life doesn't need it, and nor does mine. But how you deal with that, that's a really big matter. So I can't say much about it, but what I want to say about it is that resolving conflict has to start, in a way, going back a stage with awareness of your own part in that conflict, your own aversion, even your own hatred. Even people who sometimes write online about the importance of love, it can come across with hatred, can't it? Words and opinions are quite easy. So first of all, you have to start with that self-awareness, don't you? And I do. And that's not easy to do. But then if I'm going to come into a relationship with others and try to work with conflicts with them, I need two things, I think. Firstly, I need to seek to understand. I don't think you'll get anywhere with any interpersonal conflict unless you've really made that effort to understand. And that's tricky because you'll feel hurt if they're angry with you, or if a bit antsy with you. You'll feel like you're wrong, you'll feel threatened. It's very, very difficult to think, actually, hang on, what is it you're trying to say? Can Can you put that in another way? I remember asking of someone to say what they were trying to say, and they said it rather unpleasantly, and I just said, foul. I'm happy to play this game with you, this football, but we've got to play fair. And I just, every time he just was a bit unpleasant, I just say, foul, what are you trying to say? So perhaps we could have that rule, foul, but yeah, do try and say it, but find a way of saying it that I can hear. So if you want to resolve conflict, there needs to be a real desire, not just lip service, but a real desire to understand what the person is trying to say. That's not easy to do, but without that, you won't get to resolution. And then I think going along with that is patience. They often say that the opposite to hatred is metta, loving kindness, but it's probably more like patience. You have to say, okay, that was a bit painful you saying that, but can you, you have to find a way of being patient with your own reactions, but patient with theirs. Yeah. So yes, if you're going to resolve interpersonal conflicts, you need to be, I think, dedicated to cultivating awareness. Otherwise, you're going to blame them, basically. And then when you get into that conversation, there are difficult conversations that need to happen. I've had lots of them in my life. The vision is to understand first. I don't always live up to that vision. I wish I did. I don't always. I bet you don't. But you see that you're not going to resolve a conflict without that intention to understand and that desire to be patient. But then you have these much larger conflicts in the world, such as we're seeing focused at the moment with Black Lives Matter, at least when it comes to racism. Of course, I've not experienced racism. I have experienced something like sort of homophobia. Not very much. I must say that one of the things I'm struck with about homophobia is that you see much, much less of it. Of course, it still exists if you go to Turkey. If you go to many places in the world, it's as virulent and disgusting as ever. But certainly in London, I see men walking down the street hand in hand, which was unthinkable even 5 years ago, I think, certainly 10 years ago. I've been very fortunate in my life. I've experienced very little. I've experienced misunderstanding. And so on. And for me, the main issue about being gay, I don't really think of myself as gay anymore. But the only issue about that for me, the most damaging thing for me about it has been secrecy. That for many, until I was about 21, it was something I couldn't talk about to people, and secrecy is very damaging. But I do remember one event, which for me gives me a place to start to try to understand in my own small way, from my own perspective, what's happening a little tiny bit with Black Lives Matter. I remember, and a tiny, tiny bit of grain, but we've all of us got a grain, haven't we? And that's where we find understanding from. I remember I was sitting with my partner, for want of a better word, the man I'm in a relationship. His name's Gary. Hello, Gary, if you're watching. I doubt he is, he never does. And we were sitting on a tube together. I don't remember anything about sitting there, I just chatting to him. And we're very untouchy-feely, so there was no romantic vibe. And we're not young, as you can see. And I got off the tube, and I waited, as you do with partners or whatever you want to call them. I waited to wave. When you leave someone in the tube, you never just walk off, do you? If it's a partner, you always sort of wait and wave. So I waited to do that. As I was waiting, this very good-looking young man with curly blonde hair, he was inside the carriage, turned to face me and did a very rude sign, which I won't imitate, and looked at me with implacable hatred. And he was very close to me, so I was sort of waiting to sort of wave to Gary rather sentimentally. And he was sort of just about there, looking at me directly in the eye with implacable hatred. And that's his business. It's silly man. And nearly always it says something about yourself and so on. But what struck me about it mostly was my own, I didn't know what to do with it. It's a really odd experience that somebody would look, somebody would just look at me with this incredible, almost animal look of hatred, such as normally you'd have to have done something terrible for someone to look at you like that, to look at me with such implacable hatred. What it did to me is it confused my sense of myself. It was like you don't know what to do with it. You don't. I mean, I just didn't know what to do with it. It means it's in a way it's a trivial example, and it's a small thing in a way. But I remember that sense of disorientation. Why would they look at me? He look at me like that? And of course, later on, I kept on rehearsing. Oh, I should have gone back in and threatened him. I don't think so. I should have said something. Actually, really. And then I was thinking, no, what I should have just said is done is laugh, make some camp joke, perhaps, if I were that kind of type. But what struck me was that sense of, why would somebody look at me like that? And that's my time. I'd imagine what's happening with Black Lives Matter is that these terrible events are, well, they're bringing into focus moments like that, which must be much, much more if you're Black, because you can't be secret, can you? There's no secrecy in skin color, and having somebody look at you because of the color of your skin, and it's not just like it's really, when you get looked at in that way, it's not about you, but about something extraneous in a way. It's really shocking and disorientating and deeply disturbing about what we human beings are. So I don't know, I haven't got any cheery solution, and I don't think that's what's wanted. But when I think about issues like that, and golly, you only have to think of one, then another, and everybody's got stories to tell. What I bring to mind is the stupa at Vajrasana, our retreat center. Our retreat center is closed to the public just now. But those of you who've been there, many of you haven't, but those of you who've been there, there's this incredible stupa. A stupa is you can see the one on the shrine, something just about behind me. There's this sort of architectural form. And we've got this great stone stupa in the middle of the courtyard. And it's got a spire that points to heaven. And it's made of stone, so it's incredibly weighty, beautiful thing. But it's also strange, when we were working on it with the architects didn't quite like it. They said it's a foreign element in this world of the retreat center. It's a purpose-built retreat center. They didn't really like it, and they also thought it was too big. They wanted us to make it smaller, so it was more harmonious with the courtyard. We wanted it big so that it wasn't harmonious. We wanted it to intrude into that space. But what happens with a stupa is you always walk around it to your right. Yeah? So on a retreat at Vajrasana, even like a complete newcomer's retreat, before you know, everybody is walking around the stupa and keeping it to their right-hand shoulder. That's as a mark of respect. Yeah? And what strikes me when I see that is it's an image for community. Yeah? Our great challenge in the world at the moment, and it's a challenge I think that's also been evoked by the COVID crisis, because suddenly we're aware of the world in a way that we're not usually. I've recently been teaching in India, online. I can't imagine doing that. Suddenly, the world is one place. So that the great challenge facing, God, it sounds so grandiose, but humanity, the world, is how do we create community now? Yeah, how do we create a community in which everyone's walking the same way? People aren't fighting the other way. How do we create a community in which they're walking around something, sometimes closer to that central point, sometimes further away, in harmony with each other? Surely that is the next great, well, it's always been the great matter for human beings. But surely that is a challenge that's facing us all. How do we create a world community? And of course, there's too much to say about that. But what I wanted just to say, carrying on with this story about the stupa, is that, well, first of all, that stupa there, it's made of stone, so it's really heavy. It's really, really heavy. It's weighted in the ground. It's not. So in other words, it's not a bright idea. It's not an idea. It's not some sort of thinky thing. It's something that weighs heavily on the ground. Yeah, and this architectural form, it points to the sky. Yeah, I mean, you don't need me to unpack the symbolism of that. You've got something deeply real, deeply weighted on the ground that points you to heaven. Yeah, surely, I was just walking in Hampstead. You've got this beautiful spire church there, pointing you up. Yeah, but you need the both. You need the weight on the ground, and you need this incredible sense of an up in life. That there's not just this flat plane of the horizon and us fighting it out in identity groups, us fighting it out in races and so on. And I know that's happened so very, very much. But you've got this weight in the center of things and this possibility of an up, which in my mind is the possibility of transcendence of everything: race, nationality, creed, gender. It's too glib to talk about that almost, but that's what the image represents: the possibility of on the flat plane, a community walking round together harmoniously, and they're walking harmoniously around something that symbolizes something that can hold a community together. So what that symbolizes in Buddhism, the stupa, it effectively symbolizes the Buddha himself. It symbolizes, from a Buddhist point of view, the greatest human value. The Buddha, remember, isn't God. It isn't any kind of supernatural figure. It represents enlightened humanity. That's the only thing I believe, of course I would believe this, I'm a Buddhist, that's weighty enough to create community, some transcendent ideal that's a human ideal, not a fantasy ideal, not an ideology, not a theory, but a human ideal that's weighted in our human life. Yeah? And interestingly, the stupa particularly represents the Buddha at death, because when the Buddha saw through life and death when he became enlightened. But the stupa itself comes from the original burial mound that the Buddha was buried in. Yeah? So the Buddhist symbolism of the stupa is death. So I was thinking, in our human life, that is the greatest mystery, isn't it? The thing we don't know anything about, any of us do, and I don't know about, and you don't know about, is death. So perhaps one way of imagining is that we put death in the center, weighted in the center. Remember, not death in the sense of the end, because Buddhism doesn't see death as the end. It sees the possibility of transcendence of everything, time, space, self, and so on. But yes, but for us, perhaps on our level, could we remember the fact of death? Because that's another way of putting things into proportion. That all of us want to thrive, all of us want to live well, and we forget to do that, and we cause ourselves suffering and we cause other people suffering. But if only we could remember death, and it's just around the corner. And what does our life look like, witnessed by death? Yeah. I think if we could do that more, there might be hope of creating a truly just world, a community. That's what we need. We somehow need the miracle of an a world community that is circumambulating. That's a Buddhist word for it. Truly human value. And truly human value starts with the fact that we die. We're shadowed by mortality. So look, I've talked enough. I want to make sure that we meditate and have a bit of time for questions. And I'm aware that's a very whistle-stop tour over things that are of great import, and I don't want to minimize them. All of those issues are big issues, I think. Developing self-awareness, that's a big matter. Being able to manage conflict with other people so that you understand people and actually learn from other people, and that they understand and learn from you, is a big matter. the possibility of an international community with a transcendent ideal in the middle is perhaps too big a matter to think about. But let's see if we can put a tiny part of that into a practice by doing a short period of meditation where we consciously wish people well. Yeah. So if you like to set up for meditation, if you can dim the lights. So yes, if you can dim your screen, that's sometimes good as well, isn't it? So setting yourself up to meditate. And first of all, just feeling your weight, the weight of your body on the floor and on the chair. So really tuning into the weight of your body on the cushions, on the chair. Then see if you can take your awareness into your heart. So I don't mean literally your heart. I just mean see if you can bring your awareness into your heart center. Center of your chest. So just see if you can imagine that whole area, center of your chest, opening up a bit, softening. You don't need to try to make anything happen. Just imagine it. So your weight is resting down on the cushions, on the chair, wherever you are just now. And you can really feel that. It's not an idea of your body. You can feel your body. And then just imagine yourself wishing people well. So you're surrounded by people just now. You just can't see them because they're the other side of walls, or they're down on the street or in the tube. And with Maitreyabandhu, with this practice of loving kindness, we're always remembering that everyone is just like me. That I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be unhappy. I want to feel that my life is valuable and going somewhere. And everyone feels that. Everyone wants to thrive. And you know of yourself that sometimes, even though you don't want to suffer, you kind of make yourself suffer. Or you do things that cause suffering to yourself and probably to other people. And that's just what we're like. It's not because we're uniquely bad. You don't really want that. And everyone's just in the same boat as you. They want to be well. They want to be happy. They want to be free from suffering. So just see if you can imagine that you're wishing all beings well. And you can just say, may all beings be well. May all beings be happy. Or you can just imagine that you're radiating out love and fellowship and understanding. In some traditions, they suggest you imagine rays of light or rainbow light coming out from your heart, entering into the hearts of anyone you think of. May all beings be well. May all beings be happy. May they be free from suffering. And may they make progress. So just imagining that you're irradiating loving kindness. You're wanting the best for yourself and for all beings. And then coming back to the weight of your body on the cushions or the chair. See if you can open up to the sense of your whole body. Noticing the noises, the sounds around you. And then, when you're ready, opening your eyes. Good. So yeah, when you're ready, sitting out of your meditation posture. So we've got a little bit of time to ask any questions if you've got any questions. Quite a big area that I'm trying to touch on just now, and of course, as I said, tomorrow night, Subhuti is a very senior teacher, and Suragupta is the chair of the centre. We'll talk more about it, but just see if there's any questions for just now.
Yeah, so just one's coming from Oliver. He asks how to resolve conflict with someone who's not self-aware and may not even want to know or understand your side.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Oliver's saying, how do you resolve conflict with someone who's not self-aware and not what was the second part of it?
Not self-aware and may not even want to know or understand your side.
Yes, that's right. So that is very, very difficult. How do you resolve someone who's not self-aware? I mean, the thing is as well, when we say self-awareness, it's not a thing that you have or haven't. You can be more or less self-aware. So sometimes all you can do is bear it, I'm afraid. Sometimes all you've got is patience and trying to understand. But my own experience is usually, at least in the interpersonal conflicts that you might get into, you can try to understand, and people do pick up on the fact that you're trying to understand. What I notice can happen if you don't react to them, it can change it miraculously. Usually what happens in any conflict, reaction sparks reaction really quickly, and the whole conflict, it's like the whole thing speeds up very quickly. So before you know it, you just got one thing ping off another. If you can, the first thing to do, I think, is just slow it down. Is just say, hang on. What are you saying again? The first thing is to do is to sort of slow it down. See if you can slow it down, and then really make this effort to say, okay, sorry, stop. What is it you're trying to say? I mean, I remember somebody once, I'm afraid a long time ago, an order member, I'm afraid, even at the time, he just lost his temper with me, just shouted at me. What I did, I just sort of sat there and took it, which is, I think, a bit silly. I think what I should have done is just walked off and then come back to him when he was able to be reasonable. So, for instance, if you've got a hot temper, the first thing you need is to get out of harm's way. If you think you're going to lose your temper, your first duty is to get out of harm's way, is to leave the environment. So if you need to walk, sometimes I don't particularly have a hot temper, I've got a different kind of temper, but if you have got that and you think you could do something that's harmful, you need to sort of take yourself out of that so that you're not going to say something that you'll later regret. But usually the main thing is to slow it down and to try to understand. Sometimes I'm afraid you just have to swallow it. That's life. Yeah. Any other questions?
No, not yet.
Not yet. This is usually a hot area, so I'd have thought there are questions. Yes. I don't know whether I've got anything else I want to say about it. I mean, part of dealing with conflict is being willing to be sensitive. One of the things that's difficult is to realize that you are hurt, that someone saying something to you hurts you, and it feels very difficult to admit that sometimes. And then you defend against feeling hurt. Somebody was asking me recently about meditation and does it make you more sensitive? And I was saying, well, you could hardly think meditation is going to make you less sensitive. So yes, of course, meditation makes you more sensitive. But what you'd hope to see is that you become more sensitive, but almost also more robust about that. It doesn't bother you so much to feel sensitive. You can feel hurt by something, but you don't need to immediately respond with aversion and aggression or avoidance. You can just feel hurt and not be so thrown by it. That's quite a thing to ask, but I think that is what meditation and Buddhism creates for you as you practice, is that you become more sensitive, but you're all right with being more sensitive. It's not this sort of hothouse sensitivity that sometimes people think and gets mixed up with Buddhism and meditation in the West. This sort of terribly rather precious self-protective kind of sensitivity that usually, in my experience, that's not very healthy. But yeah, I think part of managing conflict is learning to be sensitive and being okay with being sensitive. I've met men particularly who are so frightened of being weak or being seen to be weak. That is itself a sign of weakness. Being worried about being weak or seen to be weak is itself a kind of weakness. So part of managing conflict is being able to feel stuff and have that even seen, and that doesn't throw you so much. It's often people who can't bear that get very conflictual.
Actually reminded me of something I read today, which said when meditation works, it gives you a skill set that allows you to experience physical and emotional discomfort with greater poignancy but less problem.
Yes, that's right. So that's a good image for life. Meditation and life generally is that surely what we're trying to do in meditation and what we're trying to do with life is experience it more and more deeply and truly without that sense of problem. Experience life raw. I was just talking to somebody about the painter Frank Auerbach, and Auerbach apparently talks about he's always trying to get to the raw truth of the sitter. He's not trying to paint just what they look like, but the raw truth of them, the fact of them. What we're trying to do in meditation is to get to the raw truth of experience, and we're trying to feel that deeply, clearly, without reacting to that. Yeah, no, it's a good way of thinking about it.
I think it sort of links into what Anne has asked, which is if you could expand on how to swallow the fact that sometimes we can't do anything in conflict.
Yes, thank you, Anne. I think even though I say we can't do anything in conflict, what you want to do at the very least is leave the door open. If not open, then at least ajar. I've had some quite difficult conflicts with people in my life, and I've not always been able to resolve it. But what I've tried to do is keep the door a bit open. So I don't want to close the door to that person. I think it's terrible when you meet people who you do quite often meet people that I'm never going to talk to them again, where they've just sort of like closed the door on someone. You can understand that, but I feel that we close the door on ourselves when we do that. So even though sometimes you can't resolve conflict, and sometimes you have to, don't you, agree to disagree, even sometimes quite strongly disagree. But what, certainly as a Buddhist, what I would want in my life, if I can, is still this sense of the door is open to them. I've not cast them off into hell, or into, that the door is still open to them, but not in a silly way. My own teacher, Sangharakshita, said that you should forgive, but not forget. So you need to, part of the art of conflict is the art of forgiveness, isn't it? One needs to learn to forgive, and forgiveness is a sort of letting go of retribution. That's what forgiveness is, that you're not going to try and get back at them. That's, when you see people do that, that is a wonderful moral virtue, where you let go of retribution. It's actually, in very bad conflicts, it can be the only way to restore yourself, is to let go of retribution. So yeah, part of the art of conflict is, can you forgive? But yes, that doesn't mean to say you forget how someone has behaved. And that would be foolish, that would be silly. Yeah, we do. There does need to be a lot. What I'd like to see more is more forgiveness. around me. I think we also need to forgive things in the past, not forget them, and we need to learn from them, but we need to find a way of forgiving things from the past, our own past, other people's past, and so on. But yeah.
This is an interesting one because I sort of feel the same way as Harvey. He says that he has a tendency to ignore conflicts until they really just boil over. And how do we deal with resentments in more skillful and he says healthy way? Yeah,
I think that's a really important point, Harvey. This whole, I think what I meet a lot of people. I know Harvey as well. How I know Harvey, Tall Harvey, as we call him. Is it Tall Harvey? Yeah, that's right. That is Tall Harvey. Tall Harvey is young, aren't you? Tall. I don't know. I can't remember how young, but I feel I notice this particularly in young people, and particularly I think in young men, that they feel very uneasy with their own aggression, that it's not wanted, and you can understand that because male aggression can be extremely destructive, and extremely destructive. I don't need to put any more words on it. So you can understand that actually I don't really want to be associated with that. I don't want it. I mean, I'm sure that women have their own equivalent, but I've noticed it in some of my friendships with young men that they're particularly uneasy about their own aggression. And part of growing up is learn to come to terms with your own aggression, and even, not just even, but also learning how to use it, learning how to use it to think, learning how to use it to speak without overt aggression. They used to call it assertiveness. I never liked assertiveness, frankly. The people I've met who wanted to go to assertiveness training, they always seemed very angry people to me. It was never the meek ones that wanted to do assertive training. It was always the angry ones. Perhaps you've met other people, but that's the ones I've met. But yeah, I think one of the issues with all this whole range of things, conflict, aggression, and so on, is this tendency to swallow one's own aggression and even to naysay it and say it doesn't exist. If you say to people that I'm not aggressive, I don't have that, you're either lying or you really don't know yourself very well. And you're a danger to be around, frankly. Anyone who knows themselves even a bit knows that they've got much more aggression than they'd like to admit. I've got children in my life, and sometimes I remember when Alex was younger, when she was only a child, and I was holding her in my arms, and somebody nearly bumped into us, and I could just feel this wolf-like protective aggression. So you've got to get to know your aggression. That doesn't mean to say express it. It doesn't mean to say indulge it, because so often that makes things worse. But swallowing it won't help. It'll just boil over in another place. But look, there's a lot more we could say about this. I mean, this whole area of aggression, violence, conflict, difficulty, we're going to have to work with it, aren't we? We all have to work with that. I think the Buddha Dharma meditation, what we offer here at the London Buddhist Centre, is a real contribution to that question. But I want to finish by asking Emily Yoling to come back, and he's going to say something more about how we could help others. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that, Maitreyabandhu. So yeah, I'm just going to say a little bit about what we're doing this week here at the London Buddhist Centre for the donations that we get over the week. So all of this week, we're dedicating all the money that people donate for the classes in the evenings in particular, but others as well, to the India appeal that we're running for ordination team members in India. So everything that you give this week will go to that appeal. So just to say a little bit about the situation in India, some of you will have seen, of course, in the news, the very drastic situation in India that's happened as a result of the COVID crisis. India has, of course, been devastated by COVID, and however much discomfort we've experienced here, and many of us, of course, have experienced a lot, even losing our lives. In India, it really has been devastating, and people who have gone to India might be aware of the situation, say, for example, in highly overpacked slums where people really live, often 10 to a room and more, in shacks and shanties that are mere feet away from another family of also similar size. And of course, the potential for disease and death to spread in that context is very high. Now, our ordination team members, myself and Maitreyabandhu are order members of the Triratna order, and in India, there's an ordination team that work to help people who are from the Dalit community, this the ex-untouchable community as they were known in India, who have suffered deeply from caste oppression down through centuries in India. Caste in India is where you were born into a certain background, and on the basis of that background, it says who you can marry, what job you can do. If you're from a Dalit background, a marginalized background, you do the worst, the most toxic, and the most dangerous jobs. So our ordination team members, our Dharma brothers and sisters in India, work with those communities, basically to look to unyoke them from the oppression of caste, which is as much working with them and their minds to throw off this idea that somehow they are unclean, which is what Indian society has told them for generations. And they do that through working with the Buddha's teaching, through meditation, through the Buddha's wisdom, through friendship, through Sangha, through community. And that's what they've been very, very busy doing over these last few months, particularly with the Corona crisis, which has particularly badly affected this community, these marginalized communities in which the ordination team work. So the ordination team have been looking to run retreats. They've been looking to do classes over their phones, sometimes with as many as 5,000 people tuning in on their phones at any one time. They've been giving out food in those communities. So we're dedicating everything that we make this week to an appeal for them. And we're looking to raise £3,000, yeah? So £3,000 will support the work of one ordination team member for a whole year. And they'll also support their family with that as well. So they live very, very simple lives, very dedicated lives. They come from those communities themselves usually as well. And they do fantastic work. I've seen it myself firsthand. They really do phenomenal work in giving people really a new life, free from the oppression of caste, free from that idea that they themselves are unclean. So we're going to dedicate, hopefully we're going to get to £3,000. What would really help us is if you go online now, and Claudia is going to post the link in the chat where you go to. It's the, if you go to that link, and if you click on the Indian Dharma Trust link when you get to the page, so there's two links. There's one to the Future Dharma Fund and there's one to Indian Dharma Trust. Click Indian Dharma Trust and please donate to that. It will go so far in India, it really will. So if 50 people tonight, say, gave £30, we'd make up the rest of our target. We already have half of our target of £3,000. We'd make up the rest of our target. So if you have £50 to give, it really would go quite some distance in India. And I'd be very grateful. We'd all be very grateful here at the London Buddhist Centre. So thank you very, very much if you're able to do that. And yes, hopefully see you again soon. And thank you very much for coming along this evening. And take care and goodbye.